Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the October 17, 2011 meeting of the Currituck County Board of Commissioners to order. Tonight we have Reverend Kimberly Furby to deliver the invocation and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone would please stand. Welcome, Mrs. Furby.
Let us pray. Father God, we do thank you for this opportunity for allowing us to assemble together. God, we ask that you give us guidance and wisdom as we conduct your business. In Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, at 5 o'clock this afternoon, we had a joint meeting with the COA Board of Trustees to talk about some exciting news in Currituck. Further review of our aviation training facility project that's going on at around the airport at the Commerce Park. We reviewed the design, and it's a beautiful building, and we look forward to the day when we have students in it and furthering the educational opportunities to the folks in Currituck and throughout the region. Item 1 is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Item number 2, public comment. This is the time to hear comments from the public on any items of interest. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Mr. McCree, if you would be so kind to be our timekeeper this evening.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. We have Mrs. Teresa McPherson. Please come forward and give your name and address for the record. Welcome.
Good evening. Good to see you all. Glad to see you back and doing better. My name is Teresa McPherson. My address is 117 Evans Drive in Grandy. I'm here this evening for 2 reasons. The first one is I want to thank the commissioners and the staff for the repairs and the updates on our playground in Walnut Island. The kids are just really enjoying it, especially with the weather being so nice. It's just great to see them out there and enjoying it the way they are. So thank you so much for that. The second reason I'm here today is because, as some of you may know, we have Community Pride Days this month for Walnut Island, and I'm going to pass out, if you would. This is the schedule of our events. Walnut Island is once again celebrating Community Pride Days, and we began this project last year, an event designed to encourage pride, ownership, and responsibility in our neighborhood through helping one another. With the help of the help and cooperation of the Currituck County and 14 community sponsors, we were able to rally 118 volunteers to work together over a span of 3 days to gather and dispose of 12 full-size dumpsters. We removed boats, automobiles, trailers, and mowed acres of land. We're grateful to the Board of Commissioners for issuing a proclamation declaring October Community Pride Month. The residents of Walnut Island recognize the need for an ongoing commitment if we are going to effect real change. Therefore, we created a quarterly cleanup effort called Good Neighbor Day as a means of continuing the work that's begun. This year, our hope is to double our volunteer force and our sponsorship. In an effort to include the youth in our community, we've also scheduled Junior Community Pride Days with activities throughout the month to encourage our young residents to take ownership and responsibility where they live. This past weekend, our youth conducted a cleanup. We began the month by participating in the Currituck County Big Sweep. The following week, our youth made Beanie Baby blankets for the Sheriff's Department. These are packaged and given to the deputies so that they may provide blankets to children in distress. For example, if they're involved in an automobile accident or if they're involved in a domestic situation, the deputies are able to pull them out of the trunk and provide them to the children as a means of some comfort during that moment. In addition to that, this past weekend, our youth conducted a cleanup effort by collecting bottles and cans throughout Walnut Island for recycling. And on the 20th, 21st, and 22nd, we will host our island-wide cleanup effort helping residents in need. We'll once again be providing meals to all of our volunteers each day in appreciation for their hard work and commitment. The last day, we'll host an island-wide yard sale, including a penny yard sale at our community clubhouse, and all proceeds from the penny yard sale will go towards our youth activities fund. We'll end our month-long event by hosting a luncheon with the sheriff at the community clubhouse so that the children may present the blankets they made. There will be free safety DNA kits and activities for the children. Anyone who's watching, any of our residents, would like to participate in Community Pride Days, they may sign up in advance by calling 453-0604, or they can sign up that each day at the clubhouse at 8 a.m. For safety's sake, we encourage all of our volunteers to wear denim and long sleeve shirts and leather boots and work gloves. So if anybody would like any additional information on that, we'd be happy to provide them with it. Thank you so much for your commitment to our community. We could not have done it without you, especially on the heels of the hurricane and all that the county has done to assist us through that recovery. It has made a tremendous difference in Walnut Island, and we are very appreciative.
Thank you, Ms. McPherson. No one else has signed up. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in public comment? Seeing none, we'll move to item number 3, presentation and discussion by Dominion Power. This is regarding a new transmission line that will hopefully be coming in through Currituck County, and I've been told that if this transmission line had been in place before our last storm event, power would have been a whole lot, restored a lot quicker and may have not even went out at all. Am I correct?
You're absolutely correct, Mr. Chairman.
Give your name and record for the...
My name is Michael Thompson with Dominion North Carolina Power Manager, State and Local Affairs. Live in Southern Shores, North Carolina, and work out of the Currituck office. I have with me several representatives from Dominion. I would like to start off, Mr. Chairman, by apologizing to you and the board. However, I did not, we set up the date and the time, but did not realize the deadline for our presentation on the thumb key. However, at the request of the county manager, I would like to discuss 2 other items. You have a copy of those before you that was requested at a previous meeting. The first thing is it was coincidental that on the 25th of August, we apprised the county commissioners, mayors, etc., of our annual fuel filing, which you were aware of last year, and I believe that your economic developer came over to Roanoke Rapids and spoke on behalf of the county. If you will gaze with me at what I've had placed in front of you, please. A typical electrical bill is considered 1,000 kilowatt hours per month, and you will see that there are 4 columns dated January the 1st of each year of 2009, 2010, 2011, and 2012. There are 2 components of the bill, one of which is the fuel component. And I would like you to look at the 4 columns with me. 2012 is proposed, but we have filed with the North Carolina Utilities Commission, comes before them, and they receive public comment. And if they agree, then they authorize that to go into effect January 1st of the next year. You will see that in 2009, a 1,000 kilowatt hour typical bill was $100.50. And as you go across to your right, 99.17, 2010, $94.15 in 2011, then 2012 was $103.14. I've done a little math for you, and if you add those 4 numbers up and divide by 4, the average for the last 4 years of 3 historical and 1 proposed is $99.24. So you'll see that we've held our costs relatively in line, in contrary to some other consumer goods that you'll find out on the market. Are there any questions about that? The fuel factor component is something that is a pass-through to our customers, and then there is no earnings by Dominion on that particular component of our electric bills.
So in other words, this pays for the additional cost it costs you to be able to manufacture power.
We take what we estimate to be the anticipated fuel cost, Mr. Chairman. That's a very good question. For the upcoming year, we look at a true-up also of what we have experienced in the past year of what we've been charging our customers and then what we are charging them, and we try to come up with a crystal ball, but it's much more educated than that, of what our anticipated fuel costs will be for the next calendar year. So that's absolutely correct.
Thank you. Any further questions?
One, if you would, could you explain the 6% rise there? I'm looking at 2011, and then you're looking at 2012 from a 25% to a 31% increase. That's 6%. That looks like it.
Yes, sir. You'll also see that it's about that much of a decrease from 2009, 2010 to 2011, and then you do accurately see that there is about a 6% increase between 2011 and 2012. If we'll go back to last summer, where it was very warm for a long period of time, and we'll also go back to last winter, where we had a long stretch of days where we were somewhere around 20 degrees for multiple days, we did have a cold winter, so that was taken into account. There was an undercollection, if you will. What we charged in 2010, we undercollected, and in 2011, there was a decrease as a result of that, and then now we're expecting to make up the difference of what we undercollected in this calendar year and half of last calendar year, and anticipating rising fuel costs in the future.
All right. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Any other questions, Mr. Chairman?
Hearing none.
If we can move over to the next page that I have prepared for you, and if you'll, you can interrupt me at any point in time. Feel free to do so, please. And in preparation for Hurricane Irene, we have what is called mutual aid, where we contact neighboring utilities and neighboring states, and we ask them that once they have their customers out of harm's way, we need so many bucket trucks, so many line persons, et cetera, to help restore our electric service, and we make agreement. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but you can see that more than 5,000 line people and support teams were lined up, which includes tree crews, et cetera. Essential equipment is inventoried and placed out of harm's way so that when the storm does pass by, we have enough poles, wires, et cetera, to do the work that needs to be done for restoration of service. In fact, we also line up rental vehicles and helicopters in case we have to fly the lines, et cetera, to assess the damage and determine exactly what it is we need to replace or fix. Secondly, but first, actually, and foremost, is safety for our customers as well as our employees. We're not going to put our customers in harm's way, nor our employees in harm's way when we're restoring service. And I use the word paramount before, during, and after the storm. And we have this big sign that all of our yards, including Kitty Hawk, no one gets hurt on our yard. We can't stress that enough. We have a safety poster as you're driving out of the yard in a company vehicle to enforce that as well, or to make sure that they have that thought in mind. Our field crews and support teams, we have processing areas. One of them was the Roanoke Rapids Theater. The other one was the Bob Martin Horse Center in Williamston, where we process literally hundreds, if not thousands, of employees from off our system. We teach them about our safety techniques and also our techniques of stringing wire and setting poles, et cetera, to make sure that they too are safe while they're here helping us restore service to our customers. We also want to make sure that they have adequate rest time. We were generally running 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. daily, and then at night time we were packaging jobs for the crews to come in and immediately start to work when they got there. In addition to our communications with localities, and I think your county manager will attest to our communications on a daily basis, if not multi-times on a daily basis, conference calls with EOCs or county managers and coordinators. We possess the technological tools and training in advance of the hurricane. We're talking about software and hardware, et cetera. And we also identify critical facilities that we need to restore first, and those would be like hospitals, law enforcement, et cetera. If you'll turn with me to the next page, it shows a line diagram from our transmission lines through substations. Idlet is a substation. It does feed from that point south, and it does feed from that point to the east with 3 circuits of submerged cable across the Currituck Sound. You also then have substations as item number 2, where it breaks down the electricity from a much higher voltage, 115,000 or 230,000 kilovolts, to more usable voltage of 19,900 or somewhere in that vicinity. And then item number 3, that's the main circuits that I was just speaking of, where they carry 1,500 plus customers. You do some quick math and go back to 2, which does 6,000, so you typically get 4 circuits out of a substation or more. If you skip on ahead to the residential lines, and I'll go back to that down tree here in just a moment. The residential lines serve 50 plus customers you see in the red under item number 4, and it's a smaller group of customers or a neighborhood. Individual transformers is 1 to 8 customers off of the same pole, or pad mount transformer, which is the green box that you see occasionally in subdivisions. And then, of course, number 6, the actual service, is an individual service to the house. And as the chairman mentioned so accurately in the beginning, this presentation that we're going to do on transmission, we're going to come back, meet your deadline on getting the computer graphics for you at a later point in time and show you just exactly how this will say. But we have guidelines that require us, if there's certain amounts of load that are lost, that we have to have more than 2 circuits of transmission line. And this 3rd circuit, if it had been in place, and we hope that when we do that presentation you will ultimately side with us on that, is that it would allow us to get restoration of service in a much quicker period of time than was handled in the last one. I do want to mention to you that we have a very active 3-year cycle on tree trimming on our transmission lines. I think it's 4 to 5 years, Lee, on distribution, 4 to 5 years on distribution, which is the smaller lines. And this accident, or this incident, if you will, at Idlet Substation was a live tree outside of our right-of-way. Trees take on a different appearance depending on season of the year. They're very attractive from spring through the summer, but when you have storm weather, they become not as attractive. If you'll go to the next slide, please. The restoration curve, you'll see, began for us on the 27th of August, and as I like to say, went vertical like an F-14 Tomcat, and then as it came down, of course, about 24 hours later, we started restoring customers and bringing them back online, and that took us until the 4th of September. A better graphic of that would be the next page, where you'll see the 5 main offices that we have in North Carolina. And this particular area is fed out of Elizabeth City. The area of Currituck County on the beach side is fed out of our Kitty Hawk office primarily. You'll see the number of customers, and just for instance, the Outer Banks, we had 37,289 customers, which does include the beach side of Currituck County. And of those 37,289 customers, we had 30,718 affected. And if you'll jump down to the North Carolina total, in North Carolina, we do serve 121,223 customers in a 21-county area. So there is a lot of rurality, if you will, of our customers. In many instances, we had 114,069 impacted, and the quick math will show you that that was over 94% of our customers were without electricity for some period of time during that space of restoration. You can see down at the bottom the number of days, duration. The date that we experienced our first outage was actually at 38 minutes past midnight on the 26th of August, which would be 038 on the 27th. And the last one to come on would have been 9/4 at 23:30, which would be 11:30 p.m. If you'll go with me to the next page, please, number 8. The repairing and rebuilding I mentioned to you is one of my first stats, is the 5,000 line and support individuals that we had with Dominion. That force of 5,000 actually grew to 7,000, including about 3,000 from our partner utilities, which is the mutual aid that I was discussing earlier. The crews worked around the clocks, more than 1,800 poles, 4,100 cross arms, 1,400 transformers, and these numbers include not only the old North State, but the Commonwealth of Virginia. 7,100 spans of primary wire and 1,100 spans of secondary. On the Tuesday after the hurricane, we had a conference call system-wide, and they announced that in the first 2 days of restoration, we used more than 1 year's worth of wire. If you go to the next page, it's in my eyes, it's a thing of beauty. It shows a lot of bucket trucks with the buckets in the air at sunrise at the Roanoke Rapids Theater. And if you look closely, it's kind of hard to see in this early morning light. Those are Duke Power trucks. They're based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and they were one of the many companies that provided us mutual aid for the restoration after the hurricane. I'll take you to the last slide, if you would please. Number 10 is lessons learned. It is important that we continue our investment in reliability improvement programs, and this transmission line that you'll hear about at a later meeting is one of those efforts. Very expensive. The Outer Banks, or the Dare County, we put in a second transmission line there. Many of you may have noticed if you've been down there in the last 12 months. It was a separate circuit that the existing circuit went down the Sound. We came out of the Kitty Hawk substation, went down the bypass, and then came back in down at Nags Head. And this allows us to backfeed, if you will. You may remember, if you have friends or relatives or just were down in that particular area, in 2006 we had an outage along the Sound and only had one line at that time. And that line went out, and there were a lot of unhappy customers because they didn't get to cook their turkey that day. And it was a 16-hour outage, whereas if we now have that second line in, the reliability exists so that that outage would have been 1 or 2 hours maximum. Secondly, we want to improve the accuracy of the estimated restoration times. For the first time ever, we issued restoration times early in a hurricane than we ever had before. And the lesson learned is we're not going to do that again. We're going to give a much broader time of restoration, as number of days, so people can have an opportunity to plan. Because if you had called back that it was going to be back on, your power was going to be back on Tuesday, and you had that expectation, then you call back to the phone center, there was such catastrophic damage, if you will. And just a quick example of that is in Williamston and Roanoke Rapids, 98% of our customers were out of power for several days. So that we're going to work on that as one of our lessons learned. Lastly, but certainly not the least, we want to continue to strengthen our partnerships with individuals like Dan Scanlon. And I think it was Mary Beth worked closely with you, Dan, on those activities, and with state and local emergency managers and jurisdictional leaders. I would be remiss if I didn't say that Dominion also would like to partner in the reentry activities or discussions that you have. While it would be foolhardy of me to stand here and say that we would want a day or two more to restore power, especially when you're in the peak summer season of travel and tourism, even just a few hours would make a huge difference. That concludes my remarks, Mr. Chairman. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to respond.
Any questions?
I have one. Where is our electricity made? What plant are we pulling from?
Well, we don't have zebra striped or pink or green or yellow or purple kilowatt hours. It's hard to identify them. However, we have several nuclear power plants: Surrey, North Anna, Millstone, Connecticut, which is a plant that we sell in the Northeast, but it could come from any of those locations: Surrey, North Anna, Chesapeake, Bear Garden is the new gas-fired facilities. Electricity is a very strange animal, Commissioner Petrie, in that it goes the path of least resistance. So if Bear Gardens could go to the west, and it could be that North Anna and Mineral, Virginia could come down to the southeast and service here. You do lead me to another statement or a fact that I'd like to mention to you, is that the lines here are radial, like the spokes of a wheel. They go out, and there's no circuitous route, with the exception, we had Fentress to Shawboro where we put a third line in. Shawboro to the Outer Banks has 2 lines, and then we have some other lines to Roanoke Rapids, and you can feed and reconductor that way. But the nearest point, what is that substation on the Alligator River? Riders Creek. Riders Creek is a substation which is over near Plymouth, North Carolina. However, to get a line from there over to the Outer Banks to give us other than a radial feed would be a very interesting feat to get through the National Park Service and other wetlands. Yes, sir. Anyone else, please?
I have a comment or two, not a question. I'm going to go back and address the rate increase.
Yes, sir.
All right, let it go first because I wanted you to have a chance to get through your presentation and to say thank you for all the work you put in, because I know it was a Herculean effort to get power back on with as much damage as was done and the kinds of terrain that you've got to work through down here.
You're welcome.
I run the numbers on here, and I'm an accountant by background. From the 2011 to 2012 year, that looks like almost a 10% increase to me. I think Commissioner Martin was looking at the fuel increase as a percentage of it, but $94 to $103 isn't a 6% increase. Now, over the whole of this period, that may have been the case, that it's a minimal percentage. The simple fact of the matter is the objection that people have to your rate increases are the fact that you're guaranteed a statutory profit. There aren't any private corporations guaranteed a statutory profit, and you have a lock on it. You have a monopoly on that service in this area. I know you only have 121,000 customers in North Carolina, but that's not nearly the number of customers that you're dealing with through the whole Dominion Power Grid. When you have a CEO who in 2009 had to take a pay cut and it reduced his compensation to only $14 and some million, to me that's obscene. I looked at the director's pay on here. All of your directors are over $100,000 for essentially a part-time job. That's why the public gets upset with this. If you look at a guaranteed profit margin for a business in an economy like this that is given an absolute monopoly by the government to operate, a 10% increase doesn't sound like much. You can justify it. Why don't you take some of that $14 million and put it into this? I mean, you've got people out here that can't pay their electric bills, and you come along happily and cut them off if they can't do that. And, you've got a guy that nobody is worth $14 million, frankly. So that's my opinion on your rate increase. And I know one of the other commissioners is planning to offer a motion for a objection of some format from this board to your company as a result of that. That's all.
Okay. Any further comment?
I would just like to say thank you from the 14,700 customers who did without power during the Hurricane Irene, and you are a utility, and please keep in mind what the commissioner just said, that everybody's kind of hurting now, and 10% is a pretty good increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Do you have any further comments that you would like to bring forward?
I would just like to say thank you for the opportunity to come before you. Again, I apologize. I take full responsibility for not having gotten our key here to put the presentation on the screen, but we hope you will have us back in the future so we can make that presentation to make sure that you do have reliable, safe, and affordable energy here on the East Coast of the United States of America.
I look forward to when we can sit down and look at the scope of the project, and everyone can see. As you know, Dan and myself met with you guys
Yes, sir.
some time back. And then the proof will come in the pudding. And as Mr. Rohr said, the question is going to be, what's it going to cost the consumer? That's the bottom line. And those are the things I anticipate being asked. So thank you for coming. Thank all you gentlemen, and thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Item number 4, PB 11-06, Currituck County, request to amend the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 4, overlay districts to establish an airport overlay district and an amendment to the zoning map. I believe this is a continuation of a previous public hearing. Am I correct, Mr. McCree?
I believe that's correct, but in any event, I believe it was re-advertised because there may have been or may be construed as substantive changes from the text that was before you at your original public hearing. So in any event, that this is on before you for public hearing.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I am going to ask to be recused from this tonight after consultation with some people that I have a lot of respect for, the school of government and everything. So I would like the board to recuse me on this.
Mr. McCree?
I gave you my opinion at the last meeting. I don't think there is a conflict of interest, but certainly the board might consider Commissioner Etheridge's feelings and belief with regard to his acting on this matter and grant his request if you so desire.
Ms. Bluestein from the School of Government told me if I thought in my mind I had a conflict, that's what I raised the issue about.
Do I have a motion from the board? So moved. Have a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? You're excused, Mr. Etheridge. Mr. Woody, I will let you start this, I assume, you can start this off?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a continuation, or we have moved this from the previous Board of Commissioners meeting. At that last meeting, the board asked me to look at some options or some other strategies for managing specifically residential densities within the approach zone. So that's what I've focused on. There's a revised draft of the ordinance in your packets. I'll go through that briefly and hopefully bring you up to speed on where staff's recommendation is on this. I'm not going to give you all the slides, just one or two before we get to the end here, just to kind of get us back up to speed. And real quickly, the Airport Overlay District is a zoning overlay, so it's two things. It's an amendment to the zoning map. It's also a text amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance. This particular overlay, as well as with other overlays, is based on FAA guidance and documentation. We use that as the basis for developing this overlay. We also look at other jurisdictions in North Carolina and the region and all over the country. Airport overlays are not uncommon for most airports, so we tried to follow a model that's similar to other examples. Of course, through this process, we've tailored this or tried to make it fit with Currituck County and the feedback we've gotten thus far. I'll note that an airport overlay generally promotes compatible land uses in the airport area, including the approach zones, and the idea is to promote uses that are most compatible with the idea of public safety and other concerns in mind. So we try to structure this in a way that makes reasonable sense in the public interest for an airport. In this particular overlay district, what you'll see is we've addressed residential densities in the flight path, height limits, which is already in the code of ordinances, is being moved over to the zoning ordinance. Limits on lighting, the idea of having down lighting or lights that don't project upwards kind of keeps a dark sky environment for this area. Disclosure statements, we've created a provision that requires, upon real estate transaction, a disclosure to be made to the purchaser saying that there's an airport in close proximity. And then this ordinance also promotes connectivity, which is the ability to move transportation assets around more easily, and also protection of natural resources, which is typical for a lot of overlays, but that's added in this one because the county's drinking water supply is in this area, so we figure if we're going to promote aviation-related industry, we need to make sure it's consistent with our water quality in the area. So specifically, let's get into the modifications. What staff focused on was the density, the idea of density in the approach zones. And if you'll take a second to look at the map, we've got three zones. The overlay divides into three zones. These boundaries come from Part 77 approach zone information and also from an FAA document called Land Use and Compatibility Guide. The blue boundary is a circulation zone. The blue area does not have any density restrictions. It basically requires a disclosure statement and applies the lighting requirements. The green area is the end, the compatible use zone 2. The green area is the end of the approach zone. That's as you begin to leave the airport area, as your plane's reaching the altitude where it can depart from the approach zone. The green area does have some residential density restrictions that I'll go over in a second. And finally, the red area is the areas closest to the airport. Those are the areas deemed most at risk from noise, from accidents, from things of that nature. So this is kind of tiered, with red being most restrictive, blue being least restrictive. And obviously those tiers are based on impacts from aircraft, from the airport. So with that, let me go through real quickly some of the changes we made to hopefully maintain the safety aspects and the integrity of the ordinance, but also provide some flexibility to the property owners. And we focused on the approach zones. So that was the red and green areas, zones 1 and 2. First thing is we clarified that the density limits are applied to major subdivisions. So that's your larger subdivisions subdivisions of 6 or more lots. The other thing we did, and and I'll go through this real quickly. The original draft that you saw last month, what it did is it created a lot size. So it said in the Zone 1, the minimum lot size was 4 acres, and in Zone 2, the minimum lot size was 3 acres. And what that does is that requires larger tracts to be placed on the subject property. What we proposed, what we did is took a little different approach. Instead of using a lot size, is use a density. So what that means is instead of having a 4 acre or 3 acre lot size, you have a 0.25 or 0.33 density. I won't go through all the math, but what that means is you generate a number of lots based on the total acreage of your tract. But what it does, it doesn't require you to put in 4 acre lots. It lets you put in whatever lot size you want. The advantage of that is instead of spreading the large lots all over a development tract, you allow lots to be clustered. So you can achieve some density, put it into smaller lots, and the idea of clustering is that you can take the houses and move those away from the area that's impacted. Our current ordinance requires clustering when you're near water features and wetlands and things like that. So you already do this. You already use clustering as a way to reduce the lot sizes and move the lots away from the sensitive area. In this approach, what you would do is you would reduce the lot sizes, cluster the lots away from the center of the approach zone, try to move the density away from where the largest airport impacts would be. And so that allows a little more flexibility in putting out lots. It allows you to probably take some of the wetlands that are on these tracts and get some density credits for that, so it brings your density up a little higher than we originally proposed. And the exchange is you're able to shift that on the lot, hopefully away from where the most impacts are. There's a second piece to this, and hopefully this isn't, you guys are still with me on this. The next thing, and this is pretty common, this tends to be a little more common in larger airports, but it's still something that you can find in the FAA's Part 77 circular, and you can see it at other airports. It's the idea that if you're willing to better insulate a house, i.e. reduce the noise impacts, then you allow a little more density. So what we did is we set the base density of 0.25 and 0.33, which is pretty big lot or pretty low density, allow you to double that up to 0.5 or 0.66, which in lot sizes is like a 2 acre and a 1 acre and a half lot. To allow you to double the density, which is still a low density, you still have the advantage of clustering it, but what you've got to do is you've got to add noise reducing techniques to the lots. So the idea again is that in the approach zone where residential density is typically not ideal anyways, you're able to make the lot smaller, cluster them, and if you're willing to go the next step, add some noise insulation to the property, you can gain some more density. So we're trying to basically incentivize more appropriate development for an approach zone, the trade-off being you can recapture some of the density you would have on the lot. And again, this is a standard that's out there. It's been done in other places, so it's not the first time this has been proposed. Now that's and what I would also note with this is a lot of the areas in the approach zone tends to be smaller lots, which wouldn't be subject to this, and then some of the areas tend to have, I won't say significant, but a lot of wetlands involved. So oftentimes you may find that once you start to use these techniques and cluster, you may not be losing a whole lot of density on the tract. I'll also note that a lot of these tracts that are on the highway and even back, the residential density is limited, but it doesn't mean you can't do other uses. You still have the option of doing some commercial or some non-residential uses. So what we did is we've tried to find a way to allow some flexibility to the property owners, but also minimize the footprint of residential in the approach zone, which staff feels is a balanced way to move this forward. That concludes my presentation. I've got, the language is in your draft ordinance. I've got additional maps if you want to see those. I can zoom in, so I'm happy to answer any questions you have at this point.
Any questions for Mr. Woody?
I have one. Mrs. Snowden was here at the last meeting with a request about being able to divide her lots up for her family. And I think that was put to you as a consideration that we would do. I think I read it might have been taken care of, but I just want to make sure Mrs. Snowden is getting
it. It is. What this ordinance does is it targets the major subdivisions. Miss Snowden wants to create lots under the family subdivision provision, which is a type of minor, so it's not subject to these standards. But that's because she's creating a minimal number of lots. We're talking 3 or 4 lots.
But her wishes will be,
Her wish, we are consistent with her wishes, yes, sir.
thank you.
I don't have any questions. I just have a comment. I just want to thank you for all your time and effort of working with the folks who, who own the properties that we're talking about. I know we've had numerous conversations, and I know you've tried your best to find ways that would be considerations for everyone. So, Mr. Woody, thank you.
Thank you, and I have tried to do that.
Any other questions for Mr. Woody?
I just like to really maybe perhaps restate that. So by making these changes we still protect the airport from massive residential choking it off in the next 20 years or so. And we have satisfied the landowners that they can have residential, but they will have to do a couple combination of things, so they essentially retain that right where they can build what they want there with just certain restrictions.
Yeah, and I'll say up front, without surveying and going through a subdivision process, it's hard to know. But I think under this requirement, the way their land is zoned today, they should come very close to recouping the densities they could have today.
All right, thank
I'm not
you.
going to say they'll be exactly there, but they'll be very comparable. It's just in a different format.
Well, that's good news because the way it was before, it was real restrictive.
It was really extreme.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Hearing no further questions, I will open the public comment. And we have 3 people signed up. First, we have Teresa Martin. Good evening. Please give your name, address for the record.
Okay, I'm Teresa Martin.
Excuse me, I have a frog in my throat.
North Carolina, and I'm a Currituck County landowner. And good evening, Commissioner and Commissioners. I'd like to address the Board of Commissioners concerning the Currituck County Regional Airport Overlay District. My family and I have extreme concerns if the overlay district is passed. I've expressed my concerns by sending a letter to each Board of Commissioner, Mr. Woody, Mr. Scanlon, and Mr. McCrae. Some of my family members also met with Mr. Woody on September 26, 2011, and other family members have called the commissioners by phone and voiced their concerns and disapproval. Through everything I've read about the overlay district is protecting and promoting the airport. I asked before and I'll ask again, what about protecting the landowners and their visions for their land? Whether it's agricultural, residential, industrial, or recreational, property owners should have the right to do what they please with their land. It's my understanding that the Currituck County Regional Airport consists of approximately 530 acres. I'd like the board to know that our family, the Balance Walker family, has owned property in Maple since the early 1700s. To this date, our family still owns approximately 550 acres of land in Maple and around Maple. The proposed airport overlay district will affect every piece of property we own in Maple. We own a 5.31 acre plat adjoining the airport property. This property is in Zone 1 of the overlay district. This has demolished our property's value. Our options to develop this property are gone. Zone 1 has minimum lot sizes of 4 acres. It can no longer be a part of the fly-in for the airplanes. If anyone was interested in 4 acres of property on this site but did not want the other 1.31 acre, what can we ever do with it? Nothing. In my opinion, this is a taking of land. A taking can occur even without the actual physical seizure of property, such as when a government regulation has substantially devalued a property. The overlay district has devalued this piece of land, and compensation should be considered. No one would be interested in buying a piece of property that is beside a runway of an airport without access to the airport. The airport is the only entity that will benefit from this zoning, certainly not us, the property owner. Another piece of property owned by our family is 46 acres and is located in Zone 2 of the overlay district. This property consists of water frontage, beautiful water views, and the capability of being an excellent residential community. With the new overlay district proposal, the residential lot count on this property would go from as many as 26 lots to 7 to 9 lots. This is not acceptable. Could this be grandfathered in and left as it is zoned now? Due to the fact that surrounding property owners, the Becky Walker Owens property and Bells Island, have been exempted and are not affected by the overlay district, we would like to request this 48-acre family-owned property also be exempt. What is the difference in the air traffic over their property versus ours? As property owners in Currituck County, we should not be limited to what we can and cannot do with our land, especially by reducing residential lots on this property by as much as a third of its potential development. All of our other properties owned in Maple lie in Zone 3 and will be affected by the overlay district. We own property on Highway 158, 168, Maple Road, South Currituck Road, and also property on Bells Island. Please ask yourselves, how would you feel if this was your land? Do you want to see your property values drop or be told how you can and cannot develop your land? It's my understanding that the Airport Overlay District is not required by the FAA. Please listen to the people who have approached this board in objection to the Airport Overlay District, including the Balance Walker family heirs. Protect the residents and the landowners of Maple and vote no to the Currituck County Regional Airport Overlay District. These statements were concerning the planned adult retirement overlay district at the Board of Commissioners meeting held on October 3, 2011, regarding the adult retirement community with age restrictions of 55 and over. I'd like to quote statements made by Mr. O'Neill and Mr. Rohrer because I feel they also apply to the Airport Overlay District. At the October 3 Currituck County Board of Commissioners meeting, Paul O'Neill stated, quote, "I don't know if anybody on this board has noticed or not, but there ain't a whole lot going on in the county for people, for jobs, and we'd better start thinking, forget about the density right now and start thinking about people in this county, or start thinking about are people in this county going to go to work? And if we're the hindrance keeping people from developing some property, putting some people to work, then this board better wake up. And that includes all six of us up here," unquote. Just minutes later, Mr. O'Neill stated, quote, "Guys, we've got to think out of the box and allow people to start doing some stuff. There's people hurting in this county because of our restrictions, where they can't build anything. We've got electricians, plumbers, carpenters, roofers, just all kinds of contractors that would love to see something happen and love to see some homes start being built somewhere, whether it's on the Outer Banks or whether it's here on the mainland. But sometimes government's got to get the heck out of the way instead of being in the middle of everything and let some people make some business decisions," unquote. John Rohrer, vice chairman, states minutes later, "We've met the enemy and it's us," unquote. He was referring to the Board of Commissioners. Please listen to yourselves and stop dictating what landowners can and cannot do with their property. I urge you to listen to the people who have contacted and approached this board in opposition to this proposal. Protect the residents and the landowners of Maple and vote no to the Airport Overlay District. I'd also like to bring to your attention that I've got 9 family members present at this meeting in opposition to this proposal. Now, I also have some questions I would like to ask. Would the county leave the current zoning on the 46-acre property as is and exempt the 46-acre property from the airport overlay draft? I'd like to know your thoughts about the land joining the airport and the property being devalued. Would the county consider purchasing property, or with the property values dropping, will property taxes be adjusted accordingly? And one other concern is the discussion by the county on dust. And I assume this is agricultural dust. What will it have to do with the airport? You can't farm without dust. A lot of this land is farmland. And will it affect the land by the airport? And one other question, I've not heard anyone say at what height the planes will be coming in for landing and takeoff in Zone 2.
Mr. Woody, do you have any answers to those technical questions?
The 5-acre tract that's in Zone 1, which is adjacent to the airport, that property is zoned agricultural. which has a 3-acre minimum lot size, so I'm not sure they could get more than one lot today on that piece of property.
5.31 acres.
And it takes 6 to subdivide it. The other thing I'll address is the 46-acre tract. Using the acres, the 3-acre lots, it does significantly reduce the density. But if you take the scenario I just went through, the 46-acre tract, if you remove 10% of it for infrastructure, which is typical, that takes you down to about 41 acres. If you multiply, and let's say they're willing to soundproof the residential construction, so that gives them a density of 0.66. If you multiply 0.66 times 41, that equals 27 lots. So if they were willing to soundproof it and cluster, they could develop that tract for 27 lots, which is, I think, the number she mentioned as a reference point.
What is the density level today as agriculture?
Is in the northern tract in Zone 2, it is zoned RA, which is 1 unit per acre. But the problem is, using the 1 acre lot layout, you've got to remove the wetlands and things. You don't have the same ability to cluster as using a density. So again, I think if you're willing, and again, there's a step they've got to do. If they're willing to soundproof, provided, according to FAA's recommendations, then I think they can achieve a very similar density to what they could otherwise.
From what I understand, when you were speaking of that, you also talked about that anybody interested in doing that would have to come back before the board, go through mitigation, and have that passed.
Either way, you have to come back to the Board of Commissioners for a special use permit.
Well,
Before and after. But you'd have to demonstrate that the houses are soundproofed accordingly. So there is another step under the overlay.
But would that be something you could go ahead, if, ask could this property be exempted? Or could it be voted on as being 0.66 now instead of 0.33 units per acre?
Again, the way it's structured, the 0.33 is if you do nothing. If you're willing to provide the sound insulation and the soundproofing, you can increase it to 0.66. So that is an option. If that additional step is taken, which staff feels makes residential development, if we're going to have it, at least makes it more compatible with the approach zone.
So she can go to 0.66 with soundproofing,
Yes.
which is what you're looking for, I think, right, ma'am? It's 0.6.
I would like it to be exempt, but the 0.66 in your compatible zone use in your amendments, it doesn't mention anything about that in your amendments. It says maximum gross density 0.33.
If you'll keep reading that,
Mine doesn't
Well,
have
I
it.
have one other
can I read-
question.
I can-
It was alluded to that we exempted the Nicholson Point property. That was not the case. Am I correct?
Nicholson's Point is in compatible use zone 3.
Yeah, they worked with us and were willing to move and do some things that met the requirements, correct?
That subdivision's it's already been approved, invested in, and again, it's outside of the approach zone, so it's just it's not in the same area of the airport overlay.
It's adjoining, and it has property in front and on the side.
The subdivision's in compatible use zone 3.
Okay. Any questions? You finished with your presentation?
Okay, thank you very much for letting me speak to you.
Thank you. Next, we have Andy Keeney. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening. My name's Andy Keeney. I'm an attorney with law firm of Kaufman & Knowles. I live at 6008 Currituck Road in Kitty Hawk. First of all, I want to take up some of my time and thank Dan Scanlon and his staff. One of my clients is Greg Nigro, who is the Dunkin' Donuts franchise owner for all northeastern North Carolina. And they needed to get open in Corolla by Memorial Day, and Dan and his team did a magnificent job. Now they're trying to get open in Grandy before Thanksgiving, then right across from the 7-Eleven there. And again, Dan stepped up and said, we'll make it happen. Dunkin' Donuts, some people now believe it's the favorite coffee of the United States. They hire between 150 and 200 people a year. so we can have some jobs in Currituck County. They also generate an amazing amount of revenue. So thank you, Dan, and your team. The TV cameras know that Owen Etheridge is not here. My client is Doc Horace Etheridge, 88-year-old gentleman who is definitely impacted by this overlay district. You take a look at the red and you take a look at the green, and it splits 100 acres that he and his family have owned for over 100 years. He needs some time to do some estate planning, and if he was going to sell the property, it's worth a lot less when it's split in half as it is with this red and green line. He's impacted by the plan, and he asks tonight for you just to grant a continuance. There's issues that were addressed for the Snowden family, and I'm sure they thank you for that. It sounds as though tonight there were issues from the Martin family, and perhaps they would appreciate a continuance. We need time to sit back with Dan and with Ben and sit back and say, okay, what can we do here? Mr. Horace Etheridge considered a burrow pit. Yet at the last public hearing, Ben talked about this was perhaps one of the most attractive areas in the county, and you're also talking about 4 lanes. Well, do you really want a burrow pit there? He's considered a concrete plant. Remember, this is zone manufacturing. Well, do you really want a concrete plant with all that dust in front of the airport runway or the airport landing strip? Plus, for the towers and the cranes for a concrete plant, you've got to exceed 35 feet. That would create a tremendous danger. He's currently signed a lease for wind turbines, and he'll be generating power or alternative power, and you'll be getting an application for permits in the next several weeks. And is that what you really want in the future for the next 20, 30, 100 years in that property? The overlay district basically has the opportunity or the end result of denying Doc Horace Etheridge the right to develop his property, the right to sell his property, the right to use his property. I hope that I'm quoting Paul Neal correctly, but at the last public hearing, he went on record and said that he is vehemently opposed to downzoning. He thinks it's inappropriate to take people's rights away so that they cannot develop their property, especially without just compensation. To go ahead and do this to the detriment of Doc Horace Etheridge, it's an inverse condemnation. You're denying his right to go ahead as a senior citizen to do something to help himself in his old age, in his health, his condition, and his family. The land, I'm told, has good groundwater. If the county decided to buy the land, they would be protecting a future expansion, which will probably be the premier airport in all northeastern North Carolina. The water there will definitely be of a benefit to your current ROA plant and help with drinking water for the county. You'll be impacted by the moving of the road. There's no debate, no dispute that we're talking about a 4-lane road there. So you're all of a sudden going to split the property, knowing full well that he's also going to lose more property when the road is widened. I believe that Mr. O'Neill was correct. This is a downzoning. All that we request tonight is to sit back and say, please, gentleman, lady, we'd like a continuance. We'd like directions from the board for there to be a meeting with Dan and Ben, and I believe at least one of the other commissioners. When you talk about the land at issue, it's approximately 600 acres. Doc Horace Etheridge is up to 200 acres. So what you're considering here that would take decades and decades of rights away basically is 1/3 of the land owned by my client. I don't see any urgency, if the quotes are correct by Mr. Rohr about we need to do something. What's the urgency to go ahead and act tonight on the airport overlay district? It's been studied, and I think the benefit of these public hearings is there are more and more comments coming further and forward, and you're getting it fine-tuned better and better. I don't see any real downside, and perhaps you'll agree with me and grant a continuance. So thank you all that you do for Currituck County.
Thank you, Mr. Keeney. Next, we have Mac McKinney. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, sir. Mac McKinney, 152 Happy Landing Road in Maple. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, County Management, thanks for the opportunity to speak. I don't think he signed up, but I think Mr. Mark Lusinger also would like to make a comment after this if we have the time.
I will ask, is there anyone else who would like to comment? Sure.
Very good, sir. Turn this so I can see it because I don't have a hard copy of my presentation here. I'm here just as a homeowner tonight. I've not been asked by anybody here to speak. The county has not reviewed my presentation and has had no input into it. I'm just here as a property owner. I'm not speaking on behalf of Brady Landing Air Park, where I live. And full disclosure, I'm an airplane owner living in the air park, and I'm one of those strange people who actually enjoys aircraft noise, although I realize I'm a minority. And in the interest of full disclosure as well, I'm not really in favor of growing this airport significantly, although I realize I can't stop that. Next slide, please. Raised in Kentucky, lived in 4 other states in Europe, and we chose to settle here because primarily of you folks, the friendly people who live here and work here. And we're close to our clients. We teach defense contractors in D.C. and in Norfolk. And we found this tiny, sleepy little airport, Currituck County Regional, and we bought land here in 2007. Next slide. This is how pilots see Currituck Airport from our aeronautical charts. That brown circle on the right-hand side of the map over there is Currituck County Regional Airport, and you can see Elizabeth City down to the southwest, 20 or so miles. These are just a couple of circles to show you from Google Earth a view of the airport as it's seen from space. And you can see Currituck County with the white stripe there is the runway. And then I just drew, pardon my PowerPoint artwork here, not too good. I just estimated a 3-mile circle out showing the an area out 3 miles from the airport, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then also 5 miles out, which is the airport traffic area that the FAA acknowledges around every airport like Currituck, non-towered, within which, the red circle, you can expect to have significant aircraft coming and going from the airport that's in the center of that circle. Next slide, please. Go back to that one if you would, just one. The yellow circle is a tighter area within which you can expect to see lots of airport traffic, primarily not just from VFR, but also from instrument flight rules aircraft that are flying in the weather, or that are on instrument flight plans, which is the vast majority of commercial aircraft that come in and out of Currituck. So within the red circle, quite a bit of air traffic. Within the yellow circle, a lot of air traffic. Next slide. This is one of the instrument approaches into Currituck, and I've heard at several of these meetings what kind of altitudes would airplanes be flying and where would they be coming from. This is one of several approved approaches, and it's likely to be one of the most noisy, but it's a very common approach here because the aircraft will be about 500 feet off the ground and within about 3 miles of Currituck Airport as they come into Currituck. It's a so-called circling approach. And at 500 feet, the engines of the airplanes can be at full power if it's a missed approach, which is a pretty large noise footprint, especially if you have a pretty good-sized airplane. This is not too noisy for single-engine prop, a little bit more noisy for twin, and significantly noisier for jets. Next slide. So inside this yellow ring is where most of that maneuvering would take place for this specific approach into Currituck. And quite often when you hear an airplane come low over the houses around Currituck Airport, it probably is a circling approach and somebody is maneuvering to land at the airport. And of course that takes place at all hours. Next slide. But the most aircraft noise is going to be under the approach and departure corridor out of this airport. And our runways 5 and 23, depending on the wind, that's how we choose which runway we're going to use. So if you're anywhere near those yellow cones, you can expect a significant amount of noise. And unfortunately, that's the good news. It gets a little worse. Next slide. Along the runway, of course, on either side, a lot of significant noise from departures of aircraft due to engine noise. Next slide. This little airport that we found in 2007 is changing. Excuse me. The population of the county is going to grow. That means more people, and more people, of course, means more air traffic at ONX, which is pilot abbreviation for Currituck County. The Albemarle College Aviation Studies operation is going to bring aircraft, but of course it brings jobs. The industrial park is going to bring more aircraft, but of course that brings jobs, and we need jobs in the county. Business people often use jets. Jets are noisier than props. And the military flying, I think, is going to increase here over time as well, because bases are going to be closed, and it's going to be harder and harder to find places to practice approaches at non-towered fields, and we have a perfect one here. So I think we're going to continue to have military traffic here. Next slide. I don't like all these changes. The airport noise doesn't bother me, but the airport's low air traffic volume is just ideal for us getting in and out of Currituck. No delays, not a whole lot of traffic. And more airplanes here will be more congestion and eventually increased departure and arrival delays at Currituck and more noise. But this is unavoidable, and I've resigned myself to this, as I think most other people have as well. It's the nature of airports to grow. Growth means jobs and businesses. The only real question we have here is, how will the airport grow? Is it going to be in some measured, logical way that limits residential development near the airport? Because the number one threat to airports across the country is residential encroachment, residential development, which not only causes noise complaints to skyrocket, but it puts your FAA improvement funding at risk. Or are you going to grow like Oceana in Virginia Beach, with all the lawsuits and the relocations and some really unhappy homeowners? Next slide. When residential encroachment occurs up near airports, it's the taxpayers who lose. If you're a property owner and you get permission to develop, put residences into your property, you of course know that there will be aircraft noise. But you sell that property, or your family member sells that property, and they sell it again. And the owners that buy it think they can handle the noise, but pretty soon they realize they really hate that noise. The result is lawsuits, county-funded sound insulation, county or state-funded relocation of people. There's a deserted neighborhood near Los Angeles International Airport that Mr. Lusinger will talk about. And then you have situations like Naval Air Station Oceana, and there are hundreds of these. This is played out across the United States every week. But the real losers will be the county taxpayers, because it's they who will have to pay to move people to soundproof homes, and they'll handle the court fights, the lawsuits, the settlements, the relocations. And last but not least, the FAA will deny airport improvement funds to airports that have what they consider to be unnecessary residential encroachment, due to the fact that their phones also ring off the hooks because of aircraft noise. Next slide. Naval Air Station Oceana did not do what this Board of Commissioners is pondering. They did not put an overlay plan around NAS Oceana. The little cross in the center here is Naval Air Station Oceana. The yellow area around it is residential encroachment. GlobalSecurity.org says the Virginia Beach community has grown rapidly and in some cases unwisely around the base. And this is my note at the bottom. There are dozens of lawsuits ongoing around this base, lots of expenses for the taxpayer, Virginia Beach. And that money that goes to settle all of this comes from schools, from the roads that don't get repairs, from social services that don't get provided, police protection and fire protection. So it's the taxpayer who loses, and it's the county and the state who have to pay. Next slide. Pardon the eye test here. Just the underlined part might be appropriate. The Virginia Beach residents, and in fact all of Virginia, is now paying for the developers who got the money to develop this property years ago. There's a lawsuit that's currently underway involving this encroachment, and you can see some of the words here. Long-standing, steadily worsening encroachment problem around NAS Oceana without strong support from state and city governments to eliminate current and to arrest future encroachment. And then second down here, encouraging people to enact state-mandated zoning controls, enact state and local legislation and ordinances to establish a program to condemn and purchase all of the incompatible use property. The county and the state are purchasing that land at high price because they have no alternative. To fund and expend no less than $15 million annually in furtherance of the aforementioned program and to evaluate undeveloped properties in noise zones. This is the result of not having thought this through and controlled the development. Article in the 9 October Virginia Pilot newspaper about the Virginia National Defense Industrial Authority. Quote, of the $67 million allocated so far, most has gone to acquire property near Oceana to prevent development. $45 million of Virginia taxpayer money to buy that property. Next slide. So I'm asking you to pass the overlay plan and to enforce it. It saves money in the long run because we will preclude a bunch of those homeowner lawsuits for aircraft noise. It protects the airport from residential encroachment, and it protects the airport's improvement funding from the federal government. No exceptions to the low or no density residential in the zones, and I think Ben Woody has been working hard to make special allocation for some of the property owners in the area so that they can still develop their property in some way and not lose the use of it. The bottom line is the airport traffic here is going to grow. I don't like it, but so what? I'll get over it. It's the nature of airports to grow, and we knew that was a chance when we came here. We just didn't think it would happen so fast. I'm so glad I moved here. We wouldn't change our minds if we had it to do over again. Next slide. This is still going to be a great place to live, no matter what.
Any questions?
Mr. McKinney, I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
You're a pilot, and you have had conversations with different people at the airport, at the advisory board. Your number one concern with having this overlay would be what? As a pilot and as a homeowner that lives right there at the airport.
My number one concern with this overlay would be the rights of the individuals whose property would be impacted, because it's unfortunate that you don't get to do what you always thought you would be able to do with land that you own. I own a little tiny postage stamp piece of land, but I can certainly sympathize with people who have hundreds of acres and their lineage of land ownership goes back to the 1700s here. So I don't envy your jobs of having to weigh personal rights and responsibilities with the greater good of all of us. The problem is we have an airport, and it's a very special and priceless commodity. They're closing airports at the rate of one a week in the United States there for a while, due primarily to residential encroachment. So this is one of the few places in the world that you can, if you look at a map of North Carolina, we have more airports than I've seen in most other states. So we truly embrace this whole Wright brothers heritage that we have here. I mean, so I guess a long-winded answer to a simple question, but I don't have any concerns with the way this is laid out, and I think Mr. Woody's doing a super job of trying to ameliorate and lessen to the degree possible the impact on individual homeowners. And I certainly sympathize with people who have lots of land and they would like to develop it. But at the same time, I'm here to speak for a piece of dirt that can't speak for itself, and that's this airport. So I would hate to see, for whatever reason and with whatever families involved, residential encroachment eat into the buffer we have around this airport. And in the years to come, my grandchildren and their children pay the penalty for it with horrendous expenditures to relocate people into soundproof homes and all the other stuff that comes when you allow this to happen. So I'm asking that we do something now so we don't have those problems in the future.
Secondly, as a pilot, what would you say your number one concern would be if we didn't have an overlay?
As a pilot, what would my number one concern be if we didn't have an overlay? It would probably just be, well, there are some safety issues here that this overlay addresses, such as lighting and the height of structures and those kind of things. And that's, I guess, just kind of common sense for pilots. We don't like pointy things that stick up around airports because we don't want to share space with them, and the sound of aluminum against steel is an unpleasant thing. So from an obstacle standpoint, that's always a problem. So that's one thing we would very much like to see. I like the lights and the cutoff business that you have, because in a sea of lights, it's very difficult sometimes to pick out runways. So from a safety standpoint, the lights that you're talking about that have only the downward view of the lamps, that's very important for all pilots. They're going to fly in and out of here. And we try to minimize as much as we can the noise footprint. If you'll listen to 122.9 on the radio here, the automatic broadcast that comes out of Currituck, we should have brought a handheld and played it. There's been a phrase added to the weather. We get winds and we get altimeter settings and stuff every 5 minutes or so on a recorded voice, and the airport manager has added the phrase at the end, departing aircraft maintain airport runway heading until 500 feet MSL before you turn out. So what he's trying to do is extend the runway heading in both directions so that we get out away from the houses as much as we can, and we get as high as we can within safety restrictions before we turn out over the houses. So a number of us also look for opportunities between the trailer park at the end, down there at the end of runway 23 and the houses beyond it, so that we turn in over the woods instead of turning over people's homes. So I'm sure that it's not apparent to a lot of folks, but the pilots who routinely fly in and out of this airport are doing what we can to try to not be such a pain for all the residents that have to live around us. So I guess without the overlay, aside from the lights and the obstructions, which that will take care of, I guess my only concern would be without the overlay that we have the possibility that people will buy property not realizing that if the wind shifts, they're going to have airplanes going very close to their homes. So the overlay would also require the disclosure that you're within a certain proximity to the airport and you have to expect airport noise.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Hearing none, so we have signed up to speak. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Please come forward, sir, and give your name and address.
Hi, my name is Keith Darden. I'm married into the Balance family, so I would just like to say a couple things. It's very nice and easy to support something when it doesn't cost you anything. It's not quite so easy to support when your values are being diminished by potentially several $100,000. A lot of people in this county have no money, but they have some land. If you start diminishing their land values, they have nothing to retire on or support themselves with. So please consider these values before you start taking land. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Please come forward.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Mark Lusinger, live at 118 Aviator in Maple, right in the middle of the red zone. And I'm a pilot, have been for a long time. I think Mr. Woody here has done a great job on this overlay. I think it's in compliance with the FAA Part 77, as I recall. The FAA puts those overlay recommendations in place for a lot of important reasons. Safety, noise, all kinds of different constraints they look at. The problem we have here is one of compromise. One side says, the airplane should be able to take off and be clear of houses. And if they have, it's a mechanical device. If it quits, you don't want to land in somebody's living room. You want to be able to have a nice empty field to dive into. So it's a safety issue from that standpoint. The compromise on the other side is we have landowners that say, our land's going to be devalued. We can't develop it the way we want. But I think the way it looks to me, you've done an excellent job on the land density to, with some soundproofing in the house, pretty much end up about where you would have had for a development anyway. So I don't see that there's a lot of loss in there. I've got an example of an airport that I used to live near, and I saw a very similar thing happen. They came in and said, we need to put in an overlay to protect this airport. It needs to have some sound boundaries, some height restrictions on towers, all those kind of things that goes along with that. And the landowners came in and said, well, gee, we've owned this property for 100 years. Can't we grandfather out this piece over here? And, you know, we're going to devalue our land because we can't develop that piece over there. And finally, the County Board of Commissioners just backed down and said, okay, we give up. We can't ever get to a compromise on this. So the next thing that happened was they opened it up for development, and they built this huge, beautiful subdivision of brand new houses. And then all the people in the subdivision said, my God, there's airplanes flying over our house. We don't want to live here. This is horrible. And so they tried to close the airport, which was the next event. And that didn't work out. And lawsuits were filed, and the county spent millions of dollars hassling back and forth. And finally, in the end, the county said, okay, we're going to buy all of your houses and close the subdivision. So today when you take off westbound out of this airport, you look down and you see neatly laid out streets and sidewalks, but no houses. And the reason for that is they had to buy them all. I mean, it cost the county just millions of dollars to do this after the fact. So your choices are either put in the overlay up front, try to compromise between the needs of the airport and the needs of the homeowners, or spend lots of money downstream to solve the problem after the fact. And I just don't think that's a good solution for you. That airport, by the way, was Los Angeles International. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you, sir. Yes, sir, please.
Thank you very much for taking 2 weeks to get the ordinance right. I'm Ben Taylor again, back, and we're very pleased with what you've done, and I just want to bring you a souvenir.
Don't explode, does it?
19,
Give it to the county manager first.
I'm going to give it to him first. I know which way to go.
And then
This
go
is
to that
a
side.
25th of October, 1969 drawing of the airport.
Oh. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this issue this evening?
I have the gentleman that just left here,
Yes, sir. Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Taylor, is that it?
Yes.
Your concerns have been answered where you were here 2 weeks ago with your brother's property?
Yes, sir. Not perfect, but almost perfect. Is that good enough?
Close enough,
Almost perfect.
close enough for government work.
Right. No, with the way he moved it around, I gave him one other suggestion over the phone, but I don't think it's appropriate for him to bring it up right now.
No, we don't do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Going once, going twice. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to make a comment.
Mr. Gill.
At the Bark in the Park and the airport event that we had just recently, I had the opportunity to actually go up in a plane because at the last meeting I did speak that, I'm not a pilot. I'm just, a citizen. I've only been up in a small plane twice now, but had the opportunity to fly over the area through the whole flight pattern. I had the opportunity to excel at the different altitudes, and I may not be verbalizing this correctly, but had the opportunity at the noise levels of the different altitudes. Flew down to the beach area where I had the opportunity to fly very low to see, just as what the pilots are doing and what they would do when they're approaching and departing from the airport. So it was some great lessons learned for myself because trying to make a decision to support, both the citizens and homeowners, because I am one also, and also the airport. I wanted to make sure that I was making the right decisions. And that opportunity that I had gave me insights that I didn't have before. So I want to just let you know that, I'm a little smarter now. I'm not going for my pilot's license yet, but I appreciate that opportunity. And those of you that were at the airport, giving that opportunity to the children, that will also support the COA ventures that, we had spent some time earlier tonight with. So, there's great opportunities for those of you living around the airport, those of you that utilize the airport, those of you that have never been to the airport. I encourage you to come visit. If you see Currituck County from the air, it will change your perspective of of our county. It really, really will. So, again, I encourage you to at least get out to the airport and experience that and understand both sides of the story. Thank you.
Roar, you have a comment?
Since we're doing comments now, I'll go ahead with mine too. I'm also a pilot. I'm an instrument-rated private pilot and also have helicopter experience. I've been in and out of this airport, Hampton Roads Airport, Chesapeake Airport, and Chesapeake Airport has a problem exactly like the gentleman described with Los Angeles. Subdivision nearby that tried to close the airport. The airport posted instructions for pilots to follow the flight pattern going out, try to avoid the traffic, and we do that. Pilots are very conscientious about that because we don't want to lose the airports that we have. They're very dear to us, and they are going away at a rapid pace, and they're expensive to develop. Now, in this particular issue, Ms. Walker brought up the question of property owners being able to use their property and do whatever they want to with them. That isn't true. Your right to use your property only extends to the point that it does not adversely affect your neighbor's property, and that's why we have zoning and things like that in government. In this particular situation, we have potentially several hundred property owners around this airport who may, to some degree, be affected by this action if it's passed tonight. And there may be some adverse effect upon property values. We don't know. All the cases you present have been hypothetical. If there is a valid loss of value attributable to an action the county takes, you'll have the means to address that later. But at this point, it hasn't happened. And many of you tried to sell property to the county in order to protect the airport at property values of 2006 and so on, and that's not realistic. The property value that's been lost up to this point is not because of the airport, it's because of the economy, and that probably will continue. So I'm not saying the airport won't have an adverse effect, but there are 23,000 owners of this airport. This is public property, and our job as commissioners is to protect their property value as well, and that's what we're attempting to do. Yes, it's a compromise, but we're always looking to balance the interest of the public versus the interest of the private individual. We have to protect the individual's rights, but we have to also protect the public interest. And our judgment in working with Mr. Woody is that he's done an excellent job in balancing those factors here. And I, for one, feel like this overlay will not only protect the airport, it'll protect the rights of you folks to use your property in the future in a way perhaps not the way you intended, but of equal or perhaps even better value. Just because we won't let you build as many houses as you want to in the flight pattern of this airport doesn't mean you can't build a business or commercial aspect or operation there. Doesn't mean that some entity related to the airport industrial park might not come along and want to buy your property at a higher price than you have. And Mr. Keeney, I'm kind of surprised that there's a conjecture putting wind turbines off the end of this runway. I hadn't heard anything about that, and I suspect that probably won't fly, but we'd be interested to see the application, I'm sure. But anyway, look at it from the standpoint of the overall good of the county. We are very, very, very much interested in protecting the individual rights of every person that owns property around this airport. We will try to help any way we can to make sure your value is not compromised, and if so, as I said, in the future, you feel like that's happened, you will have the means to for redress to that. And I advise you to do it at that point. But right now, your hypothetical issue of my property is going to be half what it is or half what it was and the county should pay me for it, there's just no grounds for that. So.
Any further questions or comments?
I'd like to comment, if we had a work session tonight with COA, and if you could see the plans, is it on the county website, the rendering that we saw tonight
it is
of that
not
area?
yet. We can make it, but it is not yet.
For those of us that had the opportunity and the privilege to see what's going on in and around that airport tonight, it's phenomenal where Currituck County has positioned itself for the future, for our kids, for our jobs, for our businesses, and the airport is key. And it's, you know, we're in a tough balancing act up here to remember people's property rights, but we also have to take into consideration future growth for Currituck County.
Any further comments? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing, and I will ask the board for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the PB 111-06 due to its consistency with the 2006 land use plan, and that the request is reasonable and in the public interest and promotes orderly growth and development.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. Item number 5. Public hearing and action, PB 11-07, Bissell Professional Group. Request to amend Chapter 4 of the Unified Development Ordinance to modify the age restriction language for the planned adult retirement overlay district.
Mr. Chairman, if I may suggest that you wait for Commissioner Etheridge to return.
Yes, please, ask.
The county manager's gone to get him.
Can we do a 5-minute recess? Is that inappropriate?
I'd like to take a 5-minute recess, please, while we get Mr. Etheridge back in. And, thank you. Okay, item 5. I believe, I read through what the item was, did I not?
Yes.
Okay. This is, again, Mr. McCree, this is a continuation, or is this re-advertised as well?
I think, as I recall, you continued this at your last meeting. Mr. Woody, I don't recall whether this was actually advertised. Would not have been any requirement for it to be re-advertised.
There was not a requirement. We didn't re-advertise it because the notice date was set at the last hearing.
That's correct.
All right. Mr. Woody, you have any comments?
I do not have further comments. I would defer to Mr. Bissell.
Mr. Bissell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the last meeting, you provided a 2-week period for an opportunity for my client to try to get together with some of the homeowners. There was a bank meeting in Charlotte that was a required meeting for all the departments, and so therefore they weren't able to have an in-person meeting before today, and they did try to set up a conference call, but we understand that some of the residents were strongly opposed to the conference call method of having the meeting, so they wanted it in person. So we haven't been able to do that by today.
Do they have a time frame as to when possibility of having face-to-face negotiations and sitting down with the homeowners to be? I mean, we don't need to carry this thing on and on and on forever and ever. But on the other hand, if the two sides and the parties are willing to sit down and talk, my gracious, I'm willing to give them time to do that.
Well, they're absolutely willing to sit down and talk, and they're going to have to do that, and they can do that either before you take action, or they can do it before making any changes to the declaration that govern the operation of the development.
Has the board got any suggestions on the time frame?
Yes, sir. I would like to propose that we extend this and give them another 2 weeks to get together. Mr. Bissell, you can go back and talk to both sides if you wish. When they come before us and say we want, to do away with the age restriction, you got a yes vote for me. But I would like to see them to settle their differences before you bring it before us.
Mr. Chairman, can I say something?
Certainly.
We're not a referee. This is a civil matter. It's between the bank and the people that live there. Am I right?
Exactly, sir. That's what I'm asking the bank and the people who live there to do.
Okay,
Don't give it to us to make that decision.
I've got a point I'd like to inject in that.
I
to
want to finish what here's the concerns I've got. All these people that are in opposition to the age restriction, stand up. We've got 2, 3, okay? Mr. Hedberg and this gentleman was here last week. We have a new person. All these people that knew that we've continued this for 2 weeks, and now we're going to continue it for 2 weeks more. There's no spokesman. And I've said it before. there's no unification here. And if we carry it 2 more weeks and then 2 more weeks, as sooner or later, it's time to step up to the plate. I wish we'd have had more representation for Waterside Village tonight that says, hey, give me 2 weeks. I don't understand why you can't do a conference call, at least to establish some ground rules and some wishes, and then have a meeting. If they would have come back and said, we'll do a conference call, and then we're going to move forward, sure, I'll give you all the time you want, but just to refuse a conference call that I want a face-to-face, I'm not going to go along with that. So I'm going to respectfully disagree that it's time to move on. We've had 2 weeks. We told them 2 weeks, and now we want 2 more weeks. And then it'll be 2 more weeks, and 2 more weeks. At some point in time, we draw a line in the dirt. That's my opinion.
All right. I will call for another method of settling it. It's not between the banks and the homeowners that live there. It's between the various interests that own property there. There happen to be several large interests. There happen to be a whole bunch of small interests. There's a dichotomy between the resident property owners and the non-resident property owners, many of whom are small investors. The gentleman was here last week, or 2 weeks ago, Mr. Wood, is a non-resident owner. He's got a house there, just like the people that live there. He just doesn't live there. He wants the thing gone. I propose we go the whalehead route. Let's poll the resident and non-resident property owners and find out what the wishes of the majority of the owners of the property are. And we can certainly consider it based on the total numbers of individual property owners vis-a-vis the investor property owners, the 3 of which, of course, we've been dealing with on and off. And that can't take more than several weeks to do. Mr. Woody and I talked about it. Mail a card to them, get them to vote on a poll, compile the data, and then we'll know where everybody stands on there. But I don't feel like it's fair to let the resident property owners speak for the people who are not represented here because they don't happen to live in the complex.
Any further comment?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, if I may. I've looked at this since it was brought to us, and what we're talking about here, I think, in my opinion, is the integrity of the county ordinance. We passed this ordinance several years ago, and Waterside Villages came forth. The people that purchased property in there relied on the ordinance to protect them from something like this happening. Now, I'm fearful of some of the things that could happen down the road if it did change. What type of housing we might see, what could be developed there. And I know at the last meeting we asked Mr. McCree if he could review the restrictive covenants or the whatever how you want to describe it and see what rights the homeowners do have. But the basic fundamental that we're dealing with here, in my opinion, is the integrity of the county ordinance. And I know ordinances can be changed, but if we change this ordinance, are we changing it for the good? I remember when we passed this, people said eventually some smart developer will come in and say, we can't market the property, we need to change the age restriction off of it. I heard it more than one time when it was passed. So that's my big concern with it, and that's why I've said all along, if the homeowners agreed to have this taken off, then that's one thing. But if there's people in there opposing it, that's the other thing.
Okay, when you say homeowners, that's what I'm asking. You talking about only the people that live there get to voice their opinion?
No, I don't disagree with you, people that own property in there, minus the major holders that are in it, because we know what they want.
But they have a vote. They have a right.
Right now, the only thing that's standing between the people that live in there that do not want it changed and the bank is us. We remove the age restriction, there's nothing else left.
According to Mr. McCree, they still have a civil matter that they have to be compensated. Is that true, Mr. McCree?
Well, I mean, with the understanding, I'm not their lawyer, but there may be some civil remedies available to those property owners that bought property based upon a common plan and scheme of development that was represented to them at the time of their purchase.
Did you research that at all?
I have read through the covenants. I mean, one question I would have, and I'm not clear on, if you look at the definition of declarant, for example, whether Wachovia, Wells Fargo, or any of the other banks that have foreclosed on property step into those shoes, because on its face it does not appear to me that they meet the definition, because among other things the definition of declarant provides that in addition to becoming an assignee or transferor of the property rights of the declarant, there also has to be a requisite written statement of that transfer from the declarant on file with the Register of Deeds office. Now, I don't think that exists, but I also have not, of course, looked at have no way to look at loan documents, so I don't know what provisions were contained in those and the basis for the foreclosures. So that's kind of an open question. Clearly, the declarant does have the right in the covenants to unilaterally change the covenants for a certain period of time, which is set forth in the bylaws. I don't have access to the bylaws, so I don't know how long that period of time extended or if it still exists. But in any event, the declaration of covenants may be amended by 67% vote of owners of property. Well, each owner of a lot has a vote. So I think practically it appears to me, even in that event, even if the banks are not the declarants and cannot unilaterally change the covenants, I think just by virtue of the number of lots that the successor to Bank of Currituck owns, Wells Fargo owns, Old Nags Head Place owns, that probably well outnumbers the number of votes that the other homeowners within the subdivision have. So just as a matter of vote under the documents, they may well be able to prevail and modify them. So so I don't see necessarily that the property owners, there seems to be some minority that lives in there and owns property there other than the banks, would be able to prevail in preventing the change in the declaration. Although I still think that they probably do have may well have some civil remedy. But as we talked about before at the last meeting, exactly who would they have that remedy against? I mean, we have Waterside Villages LLC, which seems to have stepped in and taken over all the common properties, for example. But we don't know what assets, if any, that entity has. So it could well be a judgment-proof type of entity. I just don't know that part of it.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
So if I understand what you're saying, if these things are possible, then the only thing standing between the homeowners losing the age restriction that they cherished and bought their dreams with is the county removing it.
Well, I would say the UDO in its current form.
That's right.
But of course, it's up to this board to take into consideration the best interest of this county-wide application of the ordinance amendment to determine whether it makes sense in a land use plan and under what the applicant and others might think as it relates to their property ownership.
And the other thing I'll ask, or I'll make a comment about, is even if it's granted and Wachovia moves it or Wells Fargo moves it on, we don't know how long it will be before they market the property and find a successful person to do it. So what is the harm in trying to get these people together and see if they can come to some resolution that everybody's a win-win? I don't know if it will be exactly what everybody wants, but maybe they can come to some type of agreement. And I just think we can work on this. This is not something that's got to be done yesterday.
I would venture to say that Wachovia would like it done as soon as possible so they can start a marketing program. And I have one question for Mr. Woody. What we just voted on the airport overlay, did we make any changes from the original zoning that was, when this overlay came in, did we change anything that was 10 years ago or 5 years ago? Any of the zoning restrictions or whatever? Based on the airport overlay. And my question is this, I'm a new commissioner, I'm trying to determine when things changed, did something change for those people in that airport overlay, just like the people at Waterside Village, that things have changed, it didn't work out? Do I have a correlation here? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I know, but their original zoning has changed from what it was.
The creation of the overlay has changed the zoning rules that apply to those properties.
Right. Okay. So that's like Commissioner Etheridge was saying. We're changing what we originally said 5 or 6 years ago.
Mr. Petrie, if I may, there's a distinct difference here. We're talking about changing language that will allow a special use permit to be changed, conditions that were granted several years ago. That's a far cry from what I think y'all voted on in terms of the zoning overlay district.
I'm just trying to understand.
And I'm fearful it could open up Pandora's box because of the hard economic times, and we have a flood of we want to change our special use requirements. Once you open the door, it's open.
From my perspective, I thought this was going to be fairly simple. I still, if the bank and the property owners will sit down together and talk, we can get a definitive date and time when that's going to happen. Again, as I said, we're not going to let this go on and on forever. Sooner or later, we're going to have to resolve it one way or the other. If a vote was taken out, I could not tell you how it would go. I certainly am willing to allow folks to reasonably meet and discuss and try to come to some conclusions on their own, solve their own problems, instead of being mandated by us. So that's my thoughts.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Martin.
I would like to propose that the two groups get together and we bring this back on our first meeting in December, where we will take a deciding vote.
Are you saying December?
The homeowners and the bank needs to get together and come back to us in that first meeting, because that's when we'll take a vote on it. I'd like to extend
December?
it till then.
Mr. Martin, did you say December?
December.
So we're
First
talking
meeting
not 2 weeks,
December.
now we're talking 7 weeks.
4 or 5 weeks.
4 weeks, 5 weeks.
All you're looking at.
I'd like to ask the county in the meanwhile to poll the property owners then, if we're going to do that and make that subject to it too. Let's see what the property owners think. Let everybody voice their opinion. And I'd like to point out that one of the investors there, Red Light Management, or Old Eggs Place Number 1, is they've taken title to it, is not a bank, is not there by foreclosure. They bought lots in there, and they want it changed. So they should not be prescripted from having voting their block of votes that they have left.
How many lots do they have?
They originally bought 30. I think they have 26 left.
So they got 26. And how many residents live in Mr. Hedberg?
But
I'm guessing in the neighborhood of 2 dozen. That's just some guessing.
24. Okay.
I don't think there's that many.
I'd like to make the polling part of the motion and see that that's done. And please, the property owners, I would hope that you would write and/or call the bank and ask for that meeting. I know you have a nice community center there. If you would notify me, I'd be glad to sit down with the meeting just as a interested spectator. Mr. Bissell?
I would certainly ask you to relay to the banks that we don't know how this vote will go, so it'd be in their best interest to have that meeting and come and have the face-to-face and sit down and talk. And
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm confident that that the bank can arrange to be down here to have that meeting between now and your meeting on November the 7th.
How many lots does the bank own?
I don't know exactly. I'm guessing that they have probably in the neighborhood of 50 lots that are platted, but then they also have probably 75 more that are not platted yet, that are basically
So when we do the poll, they'll get 50
land.
votes. Is that right?
I don't know.
Clarify
that
Mr.
point.
Woody, let's let Mr. Woody and our planning folks work that out as to the individual parcels, and then we can go from there.
I know, but I want to make sure that we understand that every lot there gets one vote. Is that right?
That's why the covenants read that there's one membership per lot. Each lot has one vote.
Now, define for there's a difference between lots that have not gone to record. All of them are in preliminary plat, but they get votes for the ones on preliminary plat.
That I don't know right offhand with regard to unplatted lots or preliminary lots that are on preliminary plat.
Because they're actually Wachovia doesn't own very many lots. They own some large parcels of property that have never been subdivided, and a few lots. and all the common area. So that's an interesting question.
It is.
And the other one would be to address whether or not, if we can find out, they're actually the successor declarant. Because if they're not, then it's not a matter of Wells Fargo making this decision. Bank of Currituck's resolution company and probably on exit place number one are going to figure into that, because Wells Fargo would not own enough lots to constitute a majority vote. And they couldn't do it unilaterally unless they're successor declarant.
That's right.
Let's simplify this thing somehow. Anyone got any suggestions?
I made a motion,
I know that. I
And-
understand.
and that motion was just inclusive of the polling, and that for the two groups to get together. And I made the motion, said we will make this decision in the first meeting in December.
I'll
I
second
would
that.
like to have closure to this, but I would like to see the two groups, the two entities, to get together. Furthermore, and it's not part of the motion, I must also say that it is our ordinance which is protecting the homeowners who are now living there. And they have to be considered, not all of the other lots that are owned by different entities. When you take a poll, of course, they are going to lose. We know that already.
But I don't understand why the property rights of the people that live there differs from the property rights of the individuals
A
that bought
contract
houses.
was signed by these people that certain amenities would be given to them, Mr. Rohr. And now that contract wants to be, some part of these owners want to tear that part up.
Who'd they sign the contract with?
When they bought,
What's it got to do with the county?
we made the ordinance which put the age restriction on it.
That's the crux of the matter. Their
Exactly,
agreement,
and that's
their-
why
their
we do not need to
litigative-
change it at
litigatable
this
difference
time.
would be with the person that made that contract with them, not with the county. All we're doing is getting in the way of it.
I think they need to work it out and then bring it back to us.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
One last thing I'll say on that last comment. If what Mr. McCree says is true, they could resolve it tomorrow by changing the restrictive covenants in the bylaws. They don't need the county.
Well, I mean, obviously, they need the county with regard to our ordinance requirement for the zoning overlay.
That just reinforces what Mr. Martin just said, and that's the reason I asked the question.
Have a motion and a second. Hearing no further discussion, I need a motion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Y'all get me confused. Opposed?
No.
Ayes have it. Thank you. Please stress as hard as you can that this meeting needs to take place. And I'll ask the folks from Waterside Village, please attend, get your concerns out, organize, be ready, so we can work this thing through. Thank you so much.
I would like to close by saying December 1st in the first meeting.
I think that's what we said.
We're not going to the well again.
Well, anyhow, let's see. Next, we have item number 6, consent agenda.
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Commissioners report. Mrs. Gilbert.
First of all, I just want to say that October is Cancer Awareness Month. There's a couple, Commissioner Etheridge and myself, wearing pink to represent that. Again, I just want to reiterate that. Also, we had a wonderful time at the Bark in the Park. There was a tremendous amount of four-legged friends, along with some folks that made donations for the $10 per adoption that day that helped the ALAL. And we also had some exciting things going on at the airport at the same token. The Nightingale flew in and had the opportunity to actually see that, I guess, I don't know what your vessel, aircraft, excuse me. And it's a significant difference in just just to let people know that the Nightingale serves Currituck County, and 33% of their calls come to Currituck County. So, again, we've got a dedication on Thursday night for the Nightingale, so that's just kind of leading into it. I encourage you all to support those efforts.
Martin?
I have nothing to report. Thank you, sir.
Petrie?
I want to compliment Mrs. McPherson. She's leading the charge with other residents of Walnut Island, and they're making a difference. I'd also like to compliment Mr. Woody and his staff for working with Ms. McPherson to make a difference. And I've said it all along, Walnut Island is a diamond in the rough. Good job.
Mr. Etheridge?
Mr. Chairman, since our last meeting, we've lost 2 citizens that have meant a great deal to this county and their works and efforts in trying to help the county. And I'd ask everybody to keep their families in their prayers. We've also lost many other citizens in the last 2 weeks, and keep those families in your prayers. And I think what it points out is how quickly life can change for no apparent reason, evidently. So with that said, also this past weekend, the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners had their annual fall board meeting up in our neck of the woods here, and I want to commend Diane Nordstrom and the tourism staff for some of the things that they did to help make their stay pleasurable. And I will give you all a report later on some broadband information that was given at the meeting. It looks like we will have a broadband backbone throughout the county by May of next year, 2012. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to reiterate our condolences to the families of the folks that have passed in the past couple of weeks. I have on my black shirt tonight. I wore my pink last time for the Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but it's been a tragic couple of weeks for the county. I know all of us feel the loss of these folks because of the things they've contributed. I too would like to congratulate and offer our sincere appreciation to Ms. McPherson. You know, it's not just a matter of starting something like that, but you actually have instilled pride in the community over there. At a point, some communities get to where nobody really cares anymore. They just feel like it's hopeless. But I think you've turned that around. And we really see everybody getting out there chipping, and I think that's great. I got to do something really fun this past weekend. I had not had a chance to do it before. I stopped up at Dennis Anderson's place, Gravedigger. They had the King of the Ring Baja RC buggy races. I don't know if you know what these are, but they're radio-controlled cars about yay big with gas engines. And what a hoot that was. Honestly, you stand out there next to the track, and they throw dirt all over you. These things go screaming around the track. Guys invest $1,100 to $1,200 in these cars. They routinely bring 100 to 200 of them here for these races. It's a major tourism event. They had a yard sale at the same time. I just can't imagine how much good Dennis does for Currituck County by being an ambassador, telling people where he's from and getting out and doing that. But they're bringing tourists here for things that we never even thought of, and I really offer my congratulations and appreciation to them, too, for the work that they do. A lot of this was put on by Henry Cross at Fell Motorsports because he races those cars, too. In fact, I even saw Dennis racing one, but he wrecked it. So,
Are you going to get one?
My wife won't let me have one of those. Don't mention that on camera because,
Some of them are fast.
yeah, they are. They're really fast, but it was a lot of fun. If you get a chance, go see them.
I did owe that about Dennis Anderson. He's a great ambassador for Currituck County. And, you know, he travels all over the world. As a matter of fact, he's on some type of reality show on TV now as we speak. He's an ambassador for Currituck. And I'm very glad to have him. Let's call him a friend. And so, thank you, Dennis. Mr. Scanlon.
Nothing tonight.
Well.
Okay. Didn't think I had one tonight.
I think I know the answer to this, but just for the general public, mosquito spraying is ongoing again as we speak, correct?
Yes, sir, it is.
I know the Corral community had inadvertently been left off of the list. I've seen an email that you had sent out to clarify that they certainly were on the list and some spraying will be taking place there as well.
They were not left off the list. People had went to the website and saw the communities listed and assumed that that was all that we were doing. The challenge is being able to spray, it's weather dependent, it's temperature dependent. If it rains, we can't spray. So trying to promote a schedule too far in advance is a challenge because you don't know from day to day what you're going to do. So again, some folks had looked at that website and thought that because crawler wasn't mentioned, we weren't spraying, but it's actually scheduled for tomorrow night to be sprayed.
I assume the Gibbs Woods will be included in the non-silent spray?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
And I assume that the four-wheel drive off-road area will be included in the Corolla spray?
That I'll have to check on. The vehicle that does the spraying, I'm not sure if it can gain access to Corova Beach or the four-wheel drive area, but I'll have to check on that. I'm not sure if it's a four-wheel drive vehicle.
Okay. Just to let everybody on the board know, I've got a phone call from a reporter, a local newspaper day before yesterday. You may have seen the article in the paper saying that they had a conversation with the Corps of Engineers. Corps of Engineers has stipulated that they were ready to approve our permit request for the Ocean Pearl project. He asked me what my comments would be, and I said hallelujah in one word. It's been a long, drawn-out affair, and so hopefully we can get something moving along with that and do some of the things that we promised we would do. With that, I have nothing else. Mr. Etheridge, did you want to say something?
I was just wanting to follow up on a question about the mosquito spraying. We've had one aerial spraying, correct?
That's correct.
What did that cost for that
$60,000 for the aerial spraying.
And when we do the ground spraying, as they're doing now, the trucks do not go off of the state right-of-way, the public right-of-ways, into private lanes and things of that nature. Is that correct?
That is correct. But there's also, we have, because we're spraying a chemical, there's restrictions on when and where we can spray it. So just because you're on a state-maintained road does not also mean that we will spray on that road. If you're on some of these roads that are in very close proximity to water, we can't spray near water.
When I was a boy, I used to back up in the yard and spray DDT everywhere.
We used to run through it. That's why I glow in the dark now.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I want to make one more comment. Commissioner O'Neill had addressed the railroad and the DOT issues in Moyock and the railroad ties. The last 2 weeks, I've seen lots of activities with the railroad up in the Moyock area, removing railroad ties. In fact, they loaded a full truckload on Saturday and Sunday. I'm not sure where they came from, but they were piled up on the property of the Miller property. The Trading Post property, and loaded onto a back of a tractor trailer. So I'm not sure where they came from, but they appeared there, and they were being removed. So just to follow up on that request from Mr. O'Neill in his absence.
Comment. I would probably say the Daily Advance coverage on that story might have had something to do with it.
Thank you, Senator. I have one other thing. I know sometime back I brought to the attention, and we sent a letter to the Wildlife Resources folks about the boat ramp at Knights Island, how it was filling in. It's getting hard to get boats out of there. They sent someone over, if you remember, and said it was in need of some work being done there to get it dredged out again. Would you please send a letter to them and see as to what the status of that project is?
Yes, sir.
This is only getting worse. And also, as we talked about this afternoon, the boat ramp and facility over at Corova Beach. I want our folks to stay on top of that and make sure we get that thing done. Hunting season is coming about. I've had lots of questions and calls about it. It's been going on for some time, and I'd like to get some resolution to that as well. I know the contractor's been to that a couple months ago, so we can get that moved.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. You have any comments, Mr. Scanlon?
No, sir.
Hearing no comments, I need a motion to adjourn the Currituck County Board of Commissioners.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I would now like to reconvene as the Tourism Development Authority. Mr. Scanlon?
Mr. Chairman, you have a budget amendment in front of you as the Tourism Development Authority. The budget amendment is to carry forward a series of several contracts that were extended last year that were not completed. You have a copy of the budget amendment in your budget, your package, and including the various contracts that we're bringing forward. But the staff's request to be able to bring those forward into the current year to complete the contracts.
Pleasure of the board.
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor, is there any discussion? All in favor,
No.
signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay, if there's no further business tonight, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.